Morning. Welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I'm joined by Zach Blosting, Chris Nee. I don't know why I said good morning again because you may not be listening to this in the morning. But anyways, I digress. Real quick, guys, before we get into what's a pretty action-packed episode of OTB, a shout out to our sponsors. First off, Chattanooga Whiskey. Ooh, I almost dropped it. That would have been bad right on the computer. Crushing it in the craft distiller game, almost crushing my computer. This is their white port cask finish. It's funny, I was just talking about this with someone yesterday who's a big collector of Chattanooga whiskey. Shout out Nick over at Fallout Comics. But yeah, he said this is one that he really enjoys. Zach enjoyed it as well. But everything they do is fairly unique, interesting, different, and their standard entry level stuff. Their entry level bourbon, their rye. Please mute your mic while we're. Oh, that's me, Brett. Want to start over?
No.
Sorry, Colin. Sorry, Chattanooga Whiskey. Anywho, if you guys could see the text message that Brett sent, it was totally unnecessary, and it's about him going to the bathroom. There, I called him out. It's public. He got off my concentration. Anyways, Chattanooga Whiskey, awesome. Everything they do, really good. The 111 proof, $40. Can't beat it. And then after you drink a little bit of whiskey, what are you guys going to do? Who are you going to call?
Call the Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Colin, Amy Turner. Sad Colin right now. Make him happy, buy a house. So they do an awesome job in the home selling, home buying market, and Zach can attest to it. He has personal experience with his family, and there's another Zach who also bought a house. So just if your name is Zach, I think it's just destined to buy a house through the Turner Group. But seriously, they work really hard. Colin's very well connected. They're going to be very precise and smart and shoot you straight with the home buying process throughout the state of Florida. Well connected, get you literally where you want to go. Whew. All right, guys, there's a ton to get to. It was a very busy Wednesday, a lot of news happening. I think where I want to start, I'm just going to go over what happened from a coaching perspective, then we can dive into the details. Sound good?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So first off, the main thing that I think we can close the book on mostly, but it is hard to get an entirely straight answer, but I think our reporting is pretty solid here. So the expectation is Gus Malzahn will be on staff in 2026. That's as of today. Thursday, December 11th. We believe he will be the offensive coordinator again. So that's one thing. We get into that. Why that kind of leads to the next point is FSU hired its running backs coach to replace David Yak Johnson, who went to Arkansas, and that's Cam Martin from Tulsa. He was associate head coach there, but he'd previously been the running backs coach at UCF under whom?
Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, that's true. And that hire doesn't happen if Gus Malzahn isn't telling Cam Martin that he's going to be here. We can report that. So that's another piece of the puzzle kind of put together. And then FSU, Zach also hired whom as their quarterbacks coach because you broke this news?
Brandon Harris from UCF.
Were you credited for breaking this news?
No, but it's okay.
It's not okay. It's frustrating.
Come to expect it. So Brandon Harris is also from UCF, but he was not at UCF with Gus Malzahn. So you can't connect dots there.
Buyer Sonone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
We're now covering UCF North, and I should have had my UCF mug. That would have been good. Buyer Sonone. UCF North.
Well, the real Buyer Sonone is, did Sonone have an impact on all these UCF coaches?
That's a Sonone. I did not. Jamin Pickney, I'll give myself credit for. I helped out with that, I think.
You recruited him?
No. It's a Sonone for me because we're still less than 50% of the entire coaching staff being from there. But we're trending.
What's the ratio, Chris?
It's 5 of 13 right now, I guess.
Oh, buddy.
Including the head coach.
We're almost there.
It's pretty darn close. All right. So first off, the Gus Malzahn stuff. I think that's important to put a ribbon on it, I guess, as best as we can. FSU's not going to announce that someone who's remained under contract is still under contract. That's not what they're going to do. But there was a legitimate stretch there where it seemed like Gus Malzahn's actions were indicating that he wanted to leave Florida State, or at least was open to it if it meant getting the head coaching job elsewhere. It was reported, I can't remember by whom, but we haven't been able to confirm it. It's out there that he did interview for the Arkansas job.
It was a TV guy that covers Arkansas, I believe, that first put that out there.
All right, TV guy who covers Arkansas first put that out there, proper attribution. And then I don't either. I should have had that beforehand, but I tried. UAB was another place where he interviewed. Chris had reported that previously. So those were 2 positions. Both were filled. And then there was just the murkiness of, I'd asked Gus if he intended to stay. It was not a yes or no answer. I asked Mike Norvell last week if the expectation was for Gus and Tony to be here. He said yes, but then I thought the answer was opened itself up to some further confusion as well. So we start checking in with sources and talked to a player source who said the players thought he was leaving. Talked to a coaching industry source who was like, yeah, people around the building think he's going to leave. And then I think Tuesday he started telling people that he was going to stay. And here we are.
Yeah, and the ACC championship game was sort of one of those things date-wise that fit into this discussion because contractually that changed finances for him with regards to it. Now, ultimately, I didn't believe FSU ever had the appetite to fire him, and I expressed as much during this process. It was always more so moving on retirement or retaining him, or in other words, him staying.
I really don't know how to feel about this. I don't know how to feel about it. It doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. And I think as I fleshed through it here, it was 1 year here, and the whole concept of him coming to Florida State was he really wanted to be a coordinator, and the head coaching stuff wasn't fun for him. And then we're hearing that he's now looking at head coaching jobs again. It doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. And it was a fairly, actually, I'll stop short of saying drawn out, but it was a couple weeks of that murkiness, and I don't think that's a great place to operate from. And then there's the on-field stuff, like the offense got better markedly. Overnight. It was hard to get worse, I know, but it got markedly better to where it was a top 25 offense.
Yeah.
The issue is what it was on the road, or even versus Power 4 competition. On the road, it's like a 20th percentile to 0th percentile group. But even against Power 4 competition, it's a middling offense. And so I think you go into a season with a bar set on you. You're now asking Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell to coordinate your quarterback search as well, which we believe FSU is looking at quarterbacks in the transfer portal right now. We can talk about the GM stuff that's also happening. There's some news there where Derek Ray looks like he'll probably be heading to UCLA fairly soon. And so you'll have a void there with evaluation for at least the next couple of weeks. It just doesn't feel great to me, guys. Talk me off the ledge. Tell me I'm being dramatic if you want. It doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies.
Well, the main thing I didn't like about Gus here, I don't love Gus's system. I think I've expressed that on here routinely. But the main thing I had an issue with in year one is they tied it directly to Tommy Castellanos, and I don't get why, with the most important position in football, that is the option you go with. I understood there was familiarity. He's athletic. He can do a bit of both things that Gus wants in that offense. But I'm of the opinion, and I expressed this pretty emphatically a few weeks ago, FSU really needs to nail the quarterback position. That's the most important thing for FSU as they maintain Mike Norvell as their head coach in the current system that they're in.
Chris, I'll give you credit too. You were probably the loudest of just saying that Tommy was.
He was going to be what he is because.
Yeah, you weren't saying it was going to be bad. I think Tommy was a C quarterback for Florida State, and that's kind of what you thought he was going to be. So you were pretty early on that. And that's what he was. But that's I think where my concern is, fellas, is Gus picked Tommy. A year ago at UCF, he picked KJ Jefferson. Mike Norvell picked DJ Uiagalelei. And if they didn't get DJU after Cam Ward, they would have probably gone after KJ Jefferson. And so the quarterback evaluations, that's not me this time. The quarterback. Why'd you mute yourself then right after?
I do have disturb on, but someone texted me through it.
Wow. Okay. Anyways, I think that's why when we drop something that's kind of newsworthy, I just dropped a little nugget that FSU would have had KJ Jefferson as his backup plan to DJU, and then we get distracted and people just don't retain it. So that might be a thing for us to work on. Anyways,
power through.
for me specifically to work on. I don't love that this is the group that you have evaluating quarterbacks, I guess. Yeah.
The minute they retained Mike Norvell and we knew there would be some coaching alteration to the staff, the same thing's been the most important thing to me. Go get a great quarterback. It's the eraser. It's what you need. It's the number one thing that can kind of flip a record on its head.
Yeah. Are you willing to spend for it? And are you, well, go ahead, Zach.
No, I mean, I don't know. The Gus stuff, like, the reason why I don't personally get like the, you were saying like the warm and fuzzies about it is he just seemed checked out. Like he seemed checked out halfway through the season. You watch his pressers and he's giving extremely short answers. People are asking him like, are you giving Mike Norvell any advice, throughout this time that, I'm just focused on the offense. Like it just, and then, you hear.
I asked him that. Do I get credit for that?
No. I just think Gus is a robot. I don't know that I ever felt he was checked out. Gus's interest in doing those pressers is somewhere south of 0%.
But what does it say that the guy who you hired, who is tired of being a head coach, goes through a season and at the end of it concludes that he wants to be a head coach again?
Oh, that I agree. That's
that's what I'm saying is like I think he checked out
and then he remembered how much head coaches get paid.
I think it's possible, Zach, that he could have checked out. Well, if he was going to go to UAB, he wasn't going to be getting more than he gets as the coordinator of Florida State. Yeah, so I think there's something else to that. I think it's possible that he was checked out without the press conference stuff being the barometer for that. I just don't think he had any interest in that ever. But listen, like he doesn't really go on the road recruiting. Like that's not what he does. And the one position that he does have a hand in with quarterback, they struck out on A, B, C, D. Like I don't know. And I like Jaden O'Neal's senior film better than I did his junior stuff. I thought there was some improvement there, but still, like point being, it's like that like Landon Duckworth was a dude you were supposed to have a pre-existing relationship with. And there's some stuff behind the scenes there that didn't feel particularly good and as that developed. So like it needs to Chris's point of there has to be a quarterback that you get. I don't have a whole lot of confidence, admittedly, in the current leadership of running the football program that they can go get a top quarterback. Now, if they're willing to reset a market for one, okay, then that brings us to the other conversation is you're resetting the market and you're playing by salary cap rules, then that's a huge chunk, potentially 25% of your roster budget or something in that line. Let's say 15 to 25% they're spending on one position. So you're going to lose things elsewhere. Or if you're willing to go above it and you find some money elsewhere, and that's a different conversation, then I think that opens you up to more possibilities too. But yeah, like go get a quarterback. Yeah, sure. That sounds great. Do you trust the people evaluating the quarterback right now, Chris, to go get you a great one?
No, I don't think that. I think there's an element of the system demands, or not demands, but their belief within the system is that it allows them to take a guy with a lesser passer skill set and be effective with it, and that they're comfortable with that. And that I'm not a fan of that concept.
But that's the reality, is that is the system.
But FSU went 5-7 because Tommy Castellanos was a quarterback. Duke went 7-5 and won an ACC championship because Darian Mensah was their quarterback.
Darian Mensah is about $3 to $4 million, and Tommy Castellanos was about $1 million.
They're expensive.
Yeah, we agree. There's a difference between what the reality is and what we expect them to do. Like
spend money on the most important position in football.
Agreed, but they have not proven to do that.
Yeah, which is why the head coach should have been fired after last season, maybe the one before. But like we keep getting there. Like pick where you're going to spend your money. You clearly don't want to spend the $72 million to move on from an entire staff, or the $50 million to move on from the head coach. Spend the $4 million. Go get a good quarterback. Set yourself up for a couple years of success. You are allowed to have some level of sustainability within a program over a multi-year period.
Yeah, that's true. You are. Are they set up to do it? That's what it brings us back to.
Yeah, they have enough money to do that. Yes, they may be broke in the grand scheme of the big firings, but come on, you got $4 million that you can go do that. I can clear, if it's $4 million for 2 to 3 years or whatever it's going to be, I can clear money off of last year's roster where you could have spent $1 million on quarterback over Tommy Castle.
Oh, let's talk about that real quick. Like,
place it on that roster for the second consecutive year.
LA Jesse Harold and Mario Nash are two who have entered the transfer portal. That's close to $500,000 right there. Boom, boom. Of guys who were Mario Nash, they were in on for a while, right? But that was the guy who committed to you without an offensive line coach. I like Mario Nash. I'm not gonna second guess that take. LA Jesse Harold one I was not a huge fan of. But anyways, you took big swings on guys who didn't work out. I do like the flushing of the roster quickly. If they aren't working, you're moving on from them. The issue is you have to consistently overpay for guys.
Yes.
Because you don't do a great job recruiting them. So instead of those guys being $150,000 each, they're $200,000 to $250,000 each, right? Or somewhere among there. And like that's where you get in trouble. That's where like within the margins, you aren't an effective organization from a roster management standpoint, and that's partially why this alleged overhaul is happening.
So the 5-7 version of FSU that we just witnessed, what irked me the most is that you went and you got a number one receiver who was outstanding, a Bolitnikov type of level player. You got a tight end who you knew was super reliable, and you knew he was going to be because he fit the system, played in the system, and Randy's just a dude. I love Randy Pittman, well established. O-line, you built a good unit that was above the level of what this place has consistently had over the last decade.
Yeah, for what it was with a 1 year flip, it was impressive.
The running back production, it's not impressive, but like Gavin Sawchuk is a good enough player. Usman Chroma is someone you super invested in. Sam Singleton's the up and coming younger guy. You had enough pieces in that room that you could have an effective running game, and they did produce in the rushing attack, even if it was such a weird journey to get to the end of it. My point is, what was the one place that probably held them back most on offense this past year?
Yeah, it was quarterback.
So why not go spend? Like, if you're going to build an offense that is capable of being good, why not spend that one spot?
I agree.
Let's say they spent, let's split the difference of the money we've heard, which is $800,000 to $1 million. Let's say it's $900K. Why not double that and go get somebody that's better? Can you not get a really good quarterback last year for $1.8 million for a singular year? Why not do it? $900,000 is such a minute investment to be a team that's playing in a bowl that's much better, that's competing in the league at a higher level, and maybe winning a road game, but they opt not to do it. I'm just over that. Like, the minute they stuck with Mike Norvell and whatever that staff was going to be this coming season in 2026, the number one thing they need to go do is get a quarterback or decide that Kevin Sperry's that guy for them, which he might be, he might not be. I don't know.
They only played him in 3 games, so we didn't really get a great sample size.
It would be a leap of faith to presume he is your guy, but you got to make the decision at that spot. That's the most important piece of the offseason puzzle for them as they prepare for 2026, as they've laid out the rules for themselves.
I hope that they find ways to go over the salary cap. They don't worry about it, and that you can confidently spend $3 million on a starting quarterback or thereabouts and it not totally derail the rest of your roster building process. And I think it's going to be important to find a good quarterback. If you're trying to retain Deuce Robinson, which we believe they are, like, you're going to have to sell him on something.
Yeah. And I think that goes for the rest of that receiver room as well, like LaWayne McCoy and Mekhi Danzy. Like they're going to be pursued by other schools, is my point. And I think that you're going to need a clear option at quarterback that they feel confident in to, re-sign if they need to with FSU.
I like that we've all landed on the idea that getting a good quarterback would be a good thing. This is why you guys listen to On the Bench, is for this sort of analysis. It's for us to tell you that getting a good quarterback would be helpful. But are you willing to do it? Do you have the evaluation process to go ahead and get you a good one? Do you have infrastructure, people in place? Like, I think there's people on staff who know what a good quarterback looks like. Trust them. Go with it.
Are they the decision makers, though, is the question.
I don't think so. No. So anyways, let's see. Let's see what happens there. So Gus Malzahn, let's say, set it at a 97% likelihood that he's back. We are operating under that assumption at this point. So that brings us to his hire at running backs coach. In a vacuum, I like the Cam Martin hire. I do. I will defer to my UCF buddies who said he was good. And when they lost him a year or two ago, they were upset about that. And listen, they didn't think Gus Malzahn. They called Gus Malzahn's offense perfectly. So I just defer to them as knowing exactly what coaching hire is going to be based on the UCF regime. That's how I do my analysis. Let's talk about it though. His background, Zach, that process. Because you like the hire as well, I think, in a vacuum. So let's talk about why.
Yeah, well, he's young. I believe he's around 30 years old, and he's only been an on-field coach for 4 years. But in that time, he's coached a 1,000-yard rusher every single season. He was at Incarnate Word for 1 year, and then was at UCF with Gus Malzahn for 2 years, and then most recently spent a year at Tulsa. He got an associate head coach title there, which is ultimately why he left. I mean, he was also on the Malzahn staff, so it kind of got split apart when Malzahn left for FSU this past offseason. But yeah, I mean, that's an incredibly impressive track record for someone that young and new to the coaching industry, to have coached 4 seasons in a row with an 1,000-yard rusher. He's also regarded as a impressive recruiter. It's a little bit tough to tell just because of, like, you don't get that sample size that some of these Power 4 coaches have, with him being at UCF. Sorry to say it, Brendan, but he did land Tavion Swint at UCF, who was a 4-star running back out of the Orlando area. I liked him as a prospect.
Nice little running back in CFB 26.
Yes. Stacey Gage was another one he landed at UCF. He also landed a running back at Tulsa that apparently was their number 2 all-time ranked player in program history, according to Chris Hummer. So pretty impressive. I think this is a good hire. Auburn was also coveting him, which is noteworthy because he played at Auburn under Gus Malzahn. So for him to choose FSU over Auburn in this, with his options on the table was I think pretty noteworthy, that he trusts, Gus and the offense and, kind of the situation that FSU's in. So yeah, I'm never going to make a full judgment on someone's recruiting ability, based off, what we see on paper. But I do think that I'm a fan of what he's done so far, and I'm intrigued to see kind of what he does with the FSU logo on his chest.
Yeah, Swint was the top-ranked prospect in UCF's class the year that he came in, and Gage, I believe, was top 5 in a pretty good UCF class the year he came in. So it kind of speaks to he doesn't fear the idea of kind of big game hunting with regard
and
to that.
Swint had a number of high-level Power 4 options, and Swint stayed committed and signed with UCF despite Gus leaving last cycle. That all happened before.
I remember having many a conversation with Keywan Ratliff about Tavion Swint because of the Orlando ties between the two parties. Yeah, I like the Cam Martin hire, truthfully. Texas guy. He played in Texas at, I think, Port Arthur is where he's from. He's related to Jamal Charles, which is just an interesting little tidbit, kind of an icebreaker in conversations, I'm sure. He played the position, did a good job at it, understands the position. He's worked twice under Gus, obviously played for Gus. I think, as you're trying to do something a little different with that position and hopefully have a little bit more of a consistency in that room, this is a guy that you're taking with that idea, and we'll see what he does as a coach with the position. But a younger guy voice in that room who coached and played that position, I think there's going to carry a little weight. I'm good with it. I didn't go into any of these coaching hires for FSU expecting some kind of grand slam home runs. I think Cam Martin's a very good, solid double type of guy and has the opportunity to be even more than that for them. I also am interested to see recruiting-wise maybe the aggression he shows in that department. I think hiring a guy who has ties to Texas, a state that FSU consistently recruits, even though they're several states away, but also has the ties to the Central Florida area from his time working at UCF in a couple different roles. I think that should benefit them in some regard.
He he gets some. Well, before I talk about one more part of his background, is there any indication that his recruiting goes beyond running backs that we've seen? Like I know we listed the running backs that he's been the main on. I just wonder if he's secondary.
Well, his early role at UCF was more broad recruiting than specific to running back, but it was more in a recruiting operation.
So yeah, he was a secondary recruiter on an offensive lineman at UCF that they signed. But that's the only one that he, when you're an off-field.
What area is Zach? Where is that kid from? I'm just
Cocoa.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was involved with Boggs to some degree too. I don't think Boggs always, when I had conversations about UCF and Boggs, it was always attached to, largely Gus, followed by Tim Harris Jr. Okay. But I think Cam was involved to some degree.
So Cam Martin-Arsel gets credit, I think, for the RJ Harvey development. I think that's important.
Tied into that as well, yes.
Yeah, because that was a high school quarterback who went to Virginia as a quarterback, transferred to UCF, and ends up developing into a really good college running back. Had a lot of tools, obviously, but you helped him get there, which I think is important. And he's now doing really well in the NFL as a rookie for the Denver Broncos on my second to last place fantasy football team. So, yeah, there's
nice.
that. Yeah, I know people are interested in that. So anyways, the offensive staff, I think, kind of feels settled, guys. Now, I think the two variables are Chris Thompson and Tony Tokars, because they both have expiring contracts in February, Chris?
Yeah, the current contract that we have available for each of them, and I requested contracts again last week, and that request was filled, and it was still these current contracts, is end of February of 2026 is when both of their contracts are supposed to run out.
Okay, so those are the two. No, we haven't heard anything that makes us think that they're leaving as of now, right? So I think that seems likely that they come back. So I think the offensive staff, as it stands, is Gus Malzahn as your offensive coordinator, Tony Tokars as your quarterbacks coach, Cam Martin as your running backs coach, Tim Harris Jr. as your wide receiver coach, Chris Thompson as your tight end coach, and then Herb Hand as your offensive line coach.
Can't forget Herb, bud.
Almost did. So that's your offensive staff.
What is it with former Virginia quarterbacks becoming really good players at other positions?
Who else? Brennan Armstrong?
No, Jacob Rodriguez at Texas Tech.
Oh,
the tight end.
I didn't. Yeah. I knew he was a walk-on. I didn't realize he was a quarterback at UVA.
I mean, I believe he played multiple positions that 1 year he was at Virginia, but quarterback was among them.
Didn't UVA have to use like 4 or 5 players at quarterback like 7 or 8 years ago too? That wouldn't have been him. No, that's too long ago.
No, that wouldn't have been that. Would have been I guess that would have been 2021 for Rodriguez, most likely there. I think he's been at Tech since 22.
Anywho, all right. So defensively, they go ahead, they get another Harris. Brandon Harris will be on staff. He is Tim Harris's little brother. Brandon Harris was at Florida State, I think in Mike's first year, if I'm not mistaken, as a GA.
Yeah.
So Zach, if you want to go ahead, his background, since you reported it and written on it.
Yeah, he was at FSU in 2020, like you said, as a defensive analyst. Then he was at FIU from 2021 to 2024 as their DB coach.
FAU, I thought, not FIU.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. I was thinking, he was at FAU and was the
FU is all we know. See, with the I or the A is a little murky.
Well, he was at both, if I remember correctly. Then he left FSU, I believe, for FIU, and I believe he ended up at FAU after that.
That sounds right. I don't know why I didn't have that written in the article. I was trying to write fast.
Born in South Florida, which isn't shocking, being his father's Tim Harris Sr. and their ties to that area.
The most important thing is,
this is great, guys.
Sorry, bud.
He had the co-DC role at FAU. As well as the cornerbacks role. Then he got hired at UCF on Scott Frost's staff this past season. Coached, I think, the third best pass defense in the Big 12. And yeah, like you said, he's the younger brother of current FSU receivers coach Tim Harris, son of Ice Harris, a legendary South Florida high school football coach. Was recently named to the 2026 AFCA 30 under 30 Coaches Leadership Institute class. You guys understand how prestigious that is. And then he was hired by FSU, this week. So he's a guy that we, I mentioned in a article I dropped about like names to know. He just made sense because he obviously had the direct tie to Mike Norvell being on his first staff at FSU, and then obviously with his brother also in the building as of last season. He's young, not as proven as a recruiter as the two other staffers at FSU added, which it's kind of hard to judge because he's only been at potentially FAU, FIU, UCF, and those schools aren't typically bringing in big time prospects. So, I'm interested to see kind of what kind of impact he has at that position. There was a lot said about the Pat Surtain firing. I do think that will have like impacts. To what degree, I don't know, but we know players on the roster were kind of blindsided by that. I think high school coaches in South Florida were not super happy about that. But that's not to say that FSU is going to be like, what was the whole thing with Uncle Luke, that they were going to be like banned from South Florida?
I'm not supposed to talk about that. I got too into. I was on my Twitter trolling days.
Okay.
They did say they were banned. He did say they were banning
the committee,
and then a dude like was who's the offensive lineman, the tall one from down there?
Oh, Daughtry Richardson.
We're going back even further, buddy.
Lloyd Willis.
Yes, it was Lloyd Willis, and like then it was like he was contemplating whether to enroll early or whatever. Like days after that, and that was just
yeah. So I do think that I'm interested to see like this, hiring someone from with South Florida roots going to help alleviate some of that stuff. Pat Surtain's name carried a lot of weight in that area. But I do think that Brandon Harris has the potential to be a better recruiter there, because I think he might get after it more.
So Brandon has the chops. He played 6 years in the league. I think he finished up his playing career in the CFL briefly before he got into coaching. He started out at FIU, I think, as a GA before he ended up at FSU in a similar role as an analyst in 2020. Then he went to FIU. The second stint at FIU, he actually worked with Tim Harris Jr.'s brother, who he's now working with again during that stint. And then obviously FAU and ultimately UCF before FSU. I mean, he's a dude. He speaks the language. He knows what he's looking at. I'm interested to see the recruiting part of it. I think he's not a guy you insert into South Florida, especially because his father is so highly respected as a great coach that he was as a high school coach, Tim Harris Sr., Iceman. Yeah, I like the
Ice, wasn't it? It wasn't Iceman.
It was Ice. He just went by Ice. Ice Harris.
Iceman.
Yeah, I know. I call him Iceman, but he went by.
Chris is now making up nicknames for himself.
All right, Brett, if you're around, that's the headline. Is I call him Iceman.
Yeah, I'm fine with the hire. I think it's a good hire. It makes sense. I still find the firing of Pat to be interesting. The lack of explanation of said firing, and Pat's really not come out other than one tweet and said anything about it. It just is all very interesting to me.
It is.
Why was he the only firing?
Why was it such not public? Because it really wasn't public, but why was his so different than any other departures that seemingly are going to happen with the staff?
Yeah, everyone else, it's like, oh, we're going to go place you somewhere else. For him, it was boom, he's out.
Yep. I don't know. And Mike Norvell's comments on it, like I expect Mike to be, classy, and when he's on the microphone, be very like conscientious about what he's saying. He wished him well, and like he was appreciative of his time. Like it wasn't like a quick. I feel like if there was something insidious, it would have been a very quick, like, it was, we decided to move on, and that's not how the tone was. So it was odd.
I said when we previously spoke about it, I don't think Pat and Tony White mix perfectly, basically systems and concepts. But like, yeah, it was still weird to me just how it all kind of played out. I don't know. To be honest, it rubs me a little bit the wrong way.
Okay. Understood. The defensive staff seems to be settled now.
Yeah.
Bye or Sonone?
I'm having to buy it, I think.
I think it is.
So one thing when we talked last week, or no, sorry, earlier this week, this was after the Nick Williams hire, was trying to figure out, okay, the math to make it, 10 on-field coaches. I don't know that they care a ton about that.
Yeah, that rule went away. I think it actually
I
went
was
away
wrong on that.
last cycle. The main rule that still exists is the amount of coaches that can be on the road recruiting.
Yeah, you can have as many coaches as you want, like actually instructing on the field, but it's who you decide, the 10 you decide to send on the road. That is.
Who do we think the 10 primary ones will be? That'll be fun.
Well, we know Malzahn won't be because that's always been sort of the agreement, and we know he hasn't done it in the past. So
$3 million to not recruit guys and to flirt with other head coaching jobs. Cool.
I could see Tony coming off the road, or at least reducing the amount he is on the road because of coordinators. Traditionally, coordinators have stayed closer to home, has sort of been the recruiting approach with coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
And FSU followed that for many years. So I just think Tony's one knows that could happen, where he helps obviously with scouting of guys and the decision on guys, but ultimately isn't as hands-on as far as hitting the road.
Okay. Honestly, I'm okay with the coordinators not going on the road as much. That gives you more time to coordinate, I guess.
I know people will mention, I think when we were having this conversation privately, like T Knight's name got thrown out there. And I think O-line and D-line coaches, I think, have to go out to see guys. That's probably the most important position to actually visually see a guy before you work on getting him on the campus and making sure he's on your board and all that. So I think that's a position most likely to still have guys on the road. And then
will send them on the road together, Nick Williams and T Knight?
I don't know.
It'd be like a buddy cop movie. I'm here for it. I have to say something, guys. As we look at what I think is the totality of their big offseason moves, with one big one lingering, and that's general manager. Talked about earlier. It was reported by us, along with our colleagues over at CBS Sports, Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer, that Derek Ray is a strong candidate for the UCLA job. If I were him, I would take it because your employer basically said that they're replacing you or hiring someone over you.
It's a world reset button in college football too.
It's closer to home. It's closer to home for him. He has it's just that. If that doesn't happen, I would be shocked. So that's the expectation, and that's good for him to go find that landing spot. That seems healthy, and that now starts the clock for having to hire your general manager. I do worry about if this hire by UCLA happens imminently this week or so, and you don't have a GM hire in place immediately, who handles negotiations for you. There's a lot of backroom dealing for the transfer portal right now. Who's in charge of that? We talked about that, but that is now as a possibility. That's now emerging as a very real thing. They're going to have to navigate through. So we'll see. I don't know. Who on staff would even do that? Would it be Bruce Warwick? Would it be Mike who handles that himself? Would you go into the front office the athletic department with someone like Josh Turner, who's like their CFO? I don't know. But that is something important to figure out, who's going to deal with agents. Anyway,
you still have 35 days roughly till the portal closes. Obviously, not even actually officially open. Like guys sharing intention to go. January 2nd to January 16th are those dates.
But we know that half of that's done already.
Yeah, a great deal of that's done beforehand. And a great deal of lining up who you intend to go after and pursue in the portal, and hopefully land also is done before it actually officially opens.
Sure. So again, we've no need to belabor that. I just wanted to set it up, and we don't have to go back into it because we've talked about it. But as we look at the majority of your moves have been made. Individually, I think, guys, I like every single hire they've made. Like, it all makes sense. I like the idea of them getting younger. And then as we look they're going to and then we look at the big picture of them reevaluating their front office staff, how them pushing out some players too who just weren't mixing very well. I like the burn and churn idea. This is all stuff I was hopeful they would do a year ago. And so there's a level of, all right, it makes sense on paper. I like the moves. I like each hire. I like the big picture of it. I don't like the timeline of it. And so I feel conflicted, and I don't know how to talk about it because I want to give it praise because my evaluation of it is that it makes sense. It seems good, but it's also like, why now?
I think for me, you can't obviously change what happened last year, but I think it highlights that last year's offseason felt like a half measure. You went halfway.
People don't like you using the phrase half measure on the board, by the way, Zach.
Norvell was essentially like.
What went through your mind just then? Let's.
No, I'm just trying to think of whether to engage with that or not. Yeah, Norvell was essentially, I don't want to say force, but influence to fire a number of his coaches on staff last offseason. We know that Norvell does not like firing people. I don't think anyone likes firing people, but this is the nature of the business. It's a results-oriented business, and 2-10 is not a good result. And it just felt like when you go to that extreme and then you don't follow it up with the stuff that you're doing this offseason already with moving on from players that aren't fully bought in. I think Edwin Joseph is the example of that this offseason. I think from what I've heard, that conversation between the exit meeting with Norvell and Edwin Joseph was at the very least a mutual decision to move on from the program. So, I think Norvell did put his foot down to some degree about what Edwin's future was going to be at FSU. And I mean, we just didn't hear enough of that last offseason. I mean,
Conrad Hussey came back until
and got kicked off the team.
Getting kicked off the team before
the season. So you wasted a roster spot. Shaheem Brown, nothing bad to say about him this season, but he did have some off-field, trouble last year and remained on the roster, and it's just kind of like a rotational piece this year. And we know they tried to get Pat Payton and Marvin Jones to come back last season. So it was like it all felt like a half measure. You didn't really put your foot down and be like, okay, we're taking a stance. We're not allowing this to persist. We don't want this culture that got rotten in 2024 to persist any longer. And they kind of let that happen. And then also with like the coaching staff changes, I agree, Brendan. I like all of these coaches that they've added to the staff. They all make sense to me. Whereas like last offseason, it did not feel like I like some of the coaches they assembled last year. Funny enough, the guys from UCF, I feel like have done a pretty solid job. But
yeah, we were probably higher on some of the Nebraska hires.
Yeah, it's kind of almost inverse. Like because the UCF ones felt like
who was the best hire of last offseason?
Tim Harris.
I agree. Yeah.
But like to their own process, Tim was probably their third or fourth option.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what we were weighing it by. And also some of the intel opinions we got from people in Nebraska about the recruiting acumen of the staff. I think there's some decent coaching stuff, but the recruiting acumen, I think, was not up to what the standard needs to be at Florida State. Well documented by us at this point. But it was kind of sold to us as like really, really good. And it was, yeah. Go on, Zach. You were making a good point, but I think that was, yeah.
Yeah. So my point was that I think the moves of this offseason so far speak to what should have been done last year. And it raises the question, why not? Why didn't you take a harder stance with some of the players that you knew that there was evidence that they were not fully bought in on your process? Why didn't you get younger and go hire recruiters to your staff when you knew you needed to improve your talent acquisition process? Why is front office all of a sudden now an emphasis? Like why now do you get a consulting firm to evaluate why things are going wrong? That would have been nice to know last year.
We've gotten pushback even with our previous comments, maybe we should like flesh it out a little bit more. Why people were wondering why we're being critical of the timeline for the hire if they were like looking at Lane Kiffin. Like why? Sorry, they're asking why they're. Oh my God, what's happening? Am I having a stroke? I think so. Why they didn't start the process of evaluating a GM spot and hiring a consultant earlier? And you could have done both simultaneously. And in fact, you probably should have done both simultaneously, I think is what I would like. Why would you not?
The one thing I've been told, I asked somebody very directly that question in recent days who has some say in all of this. One thing that was brought up, if there's a certain individual you want for your GM spot who the timetable may not change even if you started early. I don't disagree. I agree they should have started. Stanford should have been the linchpin moment where you create every scenario and you start working it out instead of simply we're going to kick the can down the road and make a statement in 5 weeks and stay with essentially status quo and then start doing this. So I am of the opinion they should have started investigating front office GM stuff as a program much more heavily after Stanford. Truthfully, they should have done last offseason, but definitely after Stanford. But the point was, for example, Brian Sanders in this example, if he wants to be with the Jaguars to the end of the regular season or to some point, and he is the guy you want to hire, if you start it then versus starting it when you did start it, but he is still to hire, you still may be waiting. That was simply the thing brought up. I'm not trying to like argue they never should have done anything. I'm just saying that's
do we have an idea of the law? Why wouldn't an NFL guy who this isn't a coach, this is a front office person, and I think in Xander's like I think he's like not a consultant. I forget his title. Regardless, this isn't someone whose fingerprints are currently like on what's happening day to day. Why would you wait?
There's bonuses.
It's usually contractual, bonus related to playoffs, things like that.
Why wouldn't? Okay.
I'm just saying that exists. That is part of this discussion.
So then the process or the next question to me is: were you willing?
Well, that's why you're
unwilling to pay the bonus.
That's why you have candidates who don't have those parameters. Where if you can't financially motivate somebody away from those parameters, you have other options to go to.
But then it comes down to the timing of all of this.
Yeah, here's the counter to all of this. This wasn't some like calculated decision by them to wait because it wouldn't have mattered because we maybe couldn't have hired someone until mid-January anyway. You didn't evaluate the program and the front office with this consulting firm until well after the season ended. That could have been done in season, and you could have identified the areas of help you needed in that department. And instead, they waited until after the year. They didn't decide that they really wanted to start a search for a GM until after the NC State game when they announced Norvell was coming back. And that gives you, if we want to talk about evaluating whether candidates can leave now or later, I mean, time allows you to, like, going through a search allows you to vet options and vet plans and understand timelines for certain candidates. That's what time in a search for a GM would have done. So this shortened timeline only hurts their ability to go and potentially bring someone in before the portal opens, which is by far the most important timeline when it comes to that hire. And as of right now, I mean, we know that they would love to bring someone in before that portal opens on January 2nd, but it doesn't seem like that's trending that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the reality is a GM topic is all to move the eyes off of should have fired a head coach.
But if you're hiring the GM, which we believe, could be the case, to be like almost independent of the success of Mike Norvell,
an operation that supersedes the program.
Yeah, like then whatever's going on with Norvell, like yes, I agree. This is all eye candy. It's not something that I think personally has a ton of substance behind it, but we'll see what kind of changes they go through with their front office. But it's just
We'll see how serious they are with the moves they make.
Yeah. Is it an overhaul or is it a few additions? That's the biggest thing to me.
It doesn't need to be a singular individual. It needs to be an operation.
Agreed. Yeah, you detailed it well last episode, I think, Chris,
Yeah.
of what you think it would look like. I want to – can I speculate recklessly here? Chris, should I not?
Do what you want to do.
Okay. To me, it doesn't – with the information we currently have, and we will see, right, what the hires look like. We'll see, do they splurge for a quarterback? Like, we'll see the answers to this. But as of right now, and we'll reevaluate this, I'm willing to be moved off of this. It doesn't seem like they're making an all-in move to save Mike Norvell's job in 2026. And I say that because you're on one hand saying the evaluation process isn't good enough. Mike Alford said that on record now at this point in his actions, and all the actions are going to say that. But then you're allowing the same people who've evaluated up to this point to have the most say over what 2026 looks like. Further, the Gus Malzahn stuff, I think, to me is evidence of FSU was fine. We were told, and it jives with everything else we've heard, is that they were fine with the rehoming process. And now he's back. So are you fine with him staying? Or if you had the ability to just snap your fingers and redo it all, would you redo it? And if not, like, what's the holdup? It would be the money. We're now hearing, if you're thinking that there's a holdup with bringing in a GM now, it's bonus structure. It's like, how much would that be? How much could a bonus be for a GM, like for
a singular candidate example?
Let's see, but if that's a potential holdup for, like, we believe Brian Sanders is their top candidate. For some.
He's extremely well liked by some, yes.
For some. And so, like, how much is that? So all this to me feels like they're not throwing a ton. They're trying to save money all over the place. And they said that in a press release that what was the phrasing for finances?
Fiscally responsible.
Fiscally responsible.
That's actually what they said. And I forget, the Peter quote is what you're referencing, correct?
Yes, I believe so. If that was Peter's
quote,
it could have been anyone in the press release.
I think the cost saving, as you put it, is true for everything minus hopefully the GM structure. I think that's separate because I think that's something that's going to exist beyond the next 12 months without a shadow of a doubt type of thing. Everything else is more like we're living in a 12-month window.
Okay. And again, I'm open to it.
We also haven't yet seen the contractual items for Nick Williams, Brandon Harris, or
Cam Martin.
Thank you.
I'm going to imagine those guys are all less money. I could be wrong. Again, I'm speculating recklessly.
I presume they're 2-year deals. Cam's a younger guy, so I could certainly see it being less money than Yak was making in the position. Brandon Harris is a guy who's had some DC experience, but lesser name than Pat, just in the sense of the grandness of Pat's name for his, past stuff. I would presume it's a little less than that. I don't know on Nick, but he's been a guy that's moved a lot, so I have to imagine. Yes. Do I think FSU's trying to position themselves where if they have to go nuclear in 12 months, that's less expensive than it was now? Yes. I think that.
All right.
But there's an element.
Make sure it wasn't being just overly negative and critical with
the standard of the deal is usually 2 years for non-coordinator assistant hires at FSU. That's traditionally what they've done under the Mike Norvell years.
And I hope that's not like I want this to be give Mike Norvell a good quarterback, and we've seen what the results can be. So I hope they go all in. I hope they make big investments. I hope they do this the right way and they don't cut corners. That's what I hope. Just some of the actions right now don't feel good, but we're also early on in the process. We're not early on in the process. I'll reframe that. We are still in the process. I don't think it's early anymore. Who else is transferred out? Oh, Jalen Lucas. That's
Lucas is the next most significant name after Edwin. I think we're at 9 is where the count is at.
You got your spreadsheet up?
It's 10. We're at 10.
So 10 already, and it's really the first week post-exit interviews. So I would expect a lot more. I mean, there's a lot of names that we would expect that haven't showed up yet.
Yeah, there are 2 over to 105 currently with 32 incoming players based on where the roster would be if everybody who could return does return, and that's not including like a Jaden Jones who might be able to return because of the JUCO situation. So then when you incorporate, let's say they want at least 15 transfer players, and yeah, I would presume it's probably higher than that because it's been higher than that the last couple of years, but let's use 15 as a safe number. That would basically mean they've got to move on from 17 or 18 more players to make room for that.
Okay.
I can see that happening.
Oh yeah, certainly. There's plenty.
Like all the walk-on type players count towards that too.
Right, because it's just 105 is 105. It's no longer a scholarship count. Yeah.
All right. Anything else, guys? I think we kind of hit all the big topic stuff under an hour, which is pretty good.
Well, I think we're good.
What was your favorite part of this episode? I like the Iceman part.
Iceman, yeah.
Iceman. He's just giving people his own nickname now.
He's evolved. Final evolution, Chris.
All right, for Chris Nee, Zach Blaustein, I'm Brendan Sedone. This has been On the Bench. We'll talk to you guys next week at some point, I think. Right? Sticking the landing. Bye.